When two security guards tried to remove a black Marine from his son's graduation,
Sir, you need to leave now.
nobody expected 6 Navy SEALs to stand without a sound and freeze the entire gym. What followed wasn't a fight, it was something stronger. He didn't expect anyone to recognize him. Not here, not in a small Texas town where the red brick facade of Westbrook High had the same sun-faded flags he'd saluted 1,000 times in other places for far heavier reasons. Master Sergeant Elias Cade eased his Dodge Charger into a spot beside the chain-link fence and shut off the engine. The heat shimmered off the hood in waves, and for a second, the parking lot smelled like sun-baked asphalt and cut grass, so ordinary that it almost hurt. He smoothed the line of his deep blue Marine dress coat, checked the mirror shine on boots he had never learned to polish, just enough, then reached into the glove box. The photo was soft at the edges from being handled too often, Naomi laughing at something off camera. A tiny Jalen bundled in her arms like he was a secret. There was a tear in the corner, same as always. Elias slipped it into his inner pocket and touched it once. "I promised you," he murmured. "I wouldn't miss it." The walk to the entrance was unhurried, deliberate. He'd driven 8 hours to be early on purpose, to pick a seat that wouldn't block anyone else's view, to breathe. Inside, the gym was a living thing, metal chairs in careful rows, bleachers already creaking with too many people, banners shouting Class of 2024 in silver and black, a grandmother with a walker, a dad in a bolo tie, 2 middle schoolers sharing a bag of concession popcorn they weren't supposed to have. Life. Loud, messy, beautiful. A volunteer in a headset scanned his printed ticket without really seeing the man who handed it over. "Third row, left side, family seating," the volunteer said, tapping his clipboard. "You're good." "Appreciate it," Elias replied, voice low and even. He moved like a pillar. Nothing wasted, nothing swaying. People noticed him the way you notice a thunderhead at the edge of a blue sky. You don't know what it will do, only that it carries its own weather. A couple of heads turned at the uniform, then pretended not to. One woman smiled, soft and quick. Another whispered something to the man beside her. Elias didn't bother translating. He'd been black and tall and in dress blues long enough to recognize every flavor of gaze. He found his chair, a plastic one with a wobble, and made it steady with 2 fingers. The stage ahead was bright, the podium flanked by ferns that were trying too hard. The superintendent rehearsing the same smile for the 10th time. The line of graduates, far side of the gym, rippled and reformed like a black river. Jalen Cade was there somewhere, lanky, trying to look bored and failing. 18 years, and the ache in Elias's chest had never learned the difference between pride and sorrow. The anthem played. Hands rose to chests. Elias didn't move. His whole body was the salute. And then the room's air changed direction. 2 men in black polos and cargo pants cut down the side aisle, moving like they had a job they didn't love. Harlan Security Services on the badge, radios on their belts, earpieces curling behind their ears. The shorter one, shaved head, compact build, had the pinched mouth of someone who conquered plastic wrap with his teeth. The taller one chewed gum like it owed him money. Elias clocked them without turning his head. Stillness, he'd learned a lifetime ago, is often louder than motion. The short one stopped at his elbow, leaned down to pitch his voice just below the hum of the crowd. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us." Elias turned his head a degree. "Is there a problem?" The tall one answered. "This section is reserved for families of graduating seniors." Elias reached into his coat, unfolded the same ticket the volunteer had already blessed. "Third row, left side, family seating, confirmed." The short one didn't look at the paper. "We were told it's full." "It was full when I sat," Elias said, the corners of his mouth not moving. "Would you like to tell me who gave that order?" A beat. Gum chewer shifted his weight. This was not the script he'd practiced. "Look, it's not a big deal. We've got some open chairs at the back. Let's not turn this into." Elias's eyes rested on him, calm as glass. "I drove 8 hours to watch my son walk. I'll be sitting right here." Whispers caught like briars. A woman 2 rows over touched her husband's wrist and nodded toward them. Someone angled a phone, just enough to pretend they weren't. The short guard straightened an inch, looked around as if a supervisor might materialize if he wished hard enough. Sir, he tried again, voice tightening. I'm going to ask one more time. You can ask all day, Elias said, lower now. A door shutting softly. I'm not moving. Gumchewer sucked a tooth. Maybe you'd be more comfortable in the back. Elias didn't blink. There it was. The phrase wasn't logistics. It was heritage. It was the old request in a new shirt. Something in the space breathed differently. People feel a boundary get crossed, even when they can't name the street where it happened. The short guard tapped his radio without breaking eye contact. Elias's face didn't change. Behind his stillness, the math continued. Exits, distances, voices, temperature. He didn't want a scene. He wanted a memory that would taste sweet for his son decades from now. But control doesn't always look like movement. An older white woman to Elias's left leaned a whisper toward him. Don't you let them move you. Her fingers trembled, as if she were mad at time for making them do that. He inclined his head a fraction. Noted, not needed. His attention returned to the stage as if the conversation had already ended. For him, it had. Look. Gumchewer tried again, splitting the air with a grin that couldn't find a home. Take it up with the office. We've got our orders. You have a name, son? Elias asked, almost kindly. Officer Malley, the tall one said, too fast. You're private security, Elias replied, not unkindly. You're not an officer. The short guard, Klein on his name bar, stepped deeper into Elias's shadow, belt nearly touching knee. Okay, enough, if you don't stand up. He didn't finish. Because the far door clicked open, and the weather in the room changed again. They didn't wear uniforms. They didn't enter together. They just arrived, one by one, silent. A man with a salt and pepper beard and surgeon's hands. A broad-shouldered figure whose eyes scanned and settled in the same blink. A lean, long-framed ghost who preferred walls to aisles. 6 of them, by the time you stopped counting. They didn't make a circle. They didn't make a line. They occupied the room the way gravity occupies a planet. Invisibly, inescapably. Elias didn't look around. He didn't have to. He knew their walk. He knew the way they preferred to sit with their backs to concrete. He knew the way they breathed when they didn't want anyone to notice they were breathing. The guards didn't know yet. The guards were about to learn. Names were being called from the stage. Polite clapping rose and fell like a tide that had lost interest in the moon. But eyes near the 3rd row had wandered. Klein hovered, a man committed to an idea, even if he didn't like the company it kept. Malley shifted his stance, gum slowing by a millimeter. I'm trying to do you a favor, Malley muttered. This doesn't have to get ugly. You don't have that kind of favor to offer, Elias said, and the sentence lay down on the ground between them like a line made out of steel. 10 feet away, a voice spoke that didn't need to be loud to be heard. Is there a reason you're bothering this man? The beard belonged to Grant Ashford, though nobody in the room knew that name, except 6 men who would never forget it. He wore a fitted black coat over a gray shirt that didn't need to brag. He spoke like someone who had learned that whispering was often more dangerous than shouting. Klein glanced up, caught off guard by how much matter that voice displaced. Who are you? Grant didn't answer. He closed 2 steps, each one a sentence. I asked a question. Malley raised a palm. Sir, we've got this. No, Grant said. You don't. Across the gym, another man stood. Then another. Diego Mendez, eyes like a hawk's after a storm. Sawyer Knox, whose resting heartbeat lived in the 50s. Fane Rivers, whose hands knew 1,000 ropes and what each could do. Omar Kadir, who could empty a room with silence. Lucas Voss, who had learned on a mountain what air tasted like when it didn't want him. They stood at different angles of the gym, as if the building itself had grown the spine. Elias's gaze met Grant's for half a heartbeat, a nod so small it would have fallen off a lesser table. Recognition, not permission. Grant's mouth softened, then returned to stone. You're embarrassing yourselves, Grant told the guards, and you're about one breath from making it worse. Klein looked to Malley for a cue he didn't have. The assistant principal started across the back with a walkie pressed to her mouth, whispering emergency into it like a prayer. "I don't care what you were told," Grant said. "You will not put your hands on this man. You will not ask again." Silence developed weight. The kind of silence that pushes on the eardrums. People sat up without realizing they'd sat at all. In the graduates' line, a lanky kid with a cap that didn't fit stopped pretending he didn't see. Jalen's jaw tightened, and memory opened a door. His father at the kitchen table with a letter he never explained. His father's hand, huge and gentle, cupping the back of his head, the day Naomi's perfume faded out of the house for good. Klein drew breath like he was about to dive. "Sir," and the gym is gone. Because memory isn't a hallway, it's a trapdoor. Kandahar province, 15 years earlier. The sun didn't set kindly there. It dropped like a fist. Sand became rust, air became wire, and noise arrived as heat. Elias, then a gunnery sergeant, had just finished telling his unit a joke he'd stolen from a corporal when the world tore. The IED cuffed the lead Humvee into the air like a dog with a bone it didn't want. Metal chewed the sky. The second boom's teeth found the trailing vehicle and bent it into a prayer that hurt to look at. Then came the gunfire. Disciplined, not wild. He didn't remember deciding to move. The body made its own decisions. He slid behind a piece of a door that no longer belonged to anything and counted shapes. Smoke tried to hide someone else's sons. It failed. 6 silhouettes pinned in heat and noise around the second vehicle. One of them, young, face too clean for the math he was trying to do, was dragging another by the vest with a leg that refused to be a leg. That would be Lucas Voss. He had 3 months in country, a bullet in his thigh, and a laugh that would later make other people feel safe in elevators. "You're bleeding," Lucas gasped when Elias slid into cover beside him. "You noticed," Elias replied. He got his hands on the downed man's straps, Enrique Soto, and pulled like the ground had a bill due. "Where's your guy under the hood?" he shouted. "Right side," Lucas coughed. "Name Sawyer." The heat shrank the horizon. Elias sprinted open ground that wouldn't let him borrow its shadow. Gravel bit into his soles through the boots he'd trusted longer than most people he'd known. A burst from the ridge walked a zipper toward him and lost interest. Sawyer's leg was caught under a slab of engine that made lies out of physics. "Gunny, I'm good," Sawyer said, because men like Sawyer always lied to be polite. "No, you're not staying," Elias said and planted a boot, dug a heel, and became a lever. Ribs complained. Tendons bargained. Metal shifted, crying like the hinge of a 100-year-old church door, and Sawyer was free enough to yank, then crawl, then obey the gravity that wanted him alive. Grant appeared like a rumor, with Soto limping against his side, and Diego at their edge, each movement precise enough to publish. Thane and Omar tried to make their bodies wider than they were. The ridge spat. The ridge paused. The ridge went quiet. The way a man goes quiet when he realizes his hands won't do what he told them. There were no speeches afterward. There was grit in mouths and a roll call that delivered everyone back to the present with a limp and a laugh neither would keep. A medevac would later whop the sky into pieces. Elias would sit at the rear position until the blades stole all the sound. He wouldn't talk about it after. He never needed to. The 6 men did. They put the day in a vault and labeled the key Elias. The gym returned like a movie resuming after a power flicker. The air had that before the storm density again, the kind that makes people whisper in cliches they don't even like. Klein's jaw clenched. "Sir, last warning." He leaned in so close the belt buckle kissed plastic. "To do what?" Elias asked, not moving. "To stop making a scene. Move to the back. You're the only one making trouble," Elias said. And now the truth in his voice did that thing that truth does. It embarrassed every lie in a 5-yard radius. Klein's nostrils flared. "You think that uniform makes you better than everyone else? This is a high school, man. Not your base." The sentence stumbled out and fell flat where everyone could see it. A little girl stopped mid-wiggle. A father froze mid-zoom. Even Mally stepped a half-shoe back, as if he'd seen a snake he didn't believe in until it moved. Grant didn't raise his voice. He took a step that made the aisle check its insurance. "If you touch him," he said, "you answer to me." "And me," Diego added. which sounded like thunder figuring out where to land. And me, Omar breathed, and nobody heard it but felt it anyway. Klein blinked. The principal arrived, eyes wide, smile weaponless, and whispered something that included the words liability and donor and seating chart, and the truth arrived disguised as a mess. Some late-arriving VIP had complained. The email thread was a knot. A volunteer had panicked. The guards had been told to clear the row. The plan had been stupid, and the execution was worse. No one in row 3 cared. Klein's hand hovered near his belt again. No weapon, just threat. Grant closed the distance by a breath. 2 choices, he said. Walk away, or watch this go someplace you're not ready for. Back off, Mally said, the words flickering out around the gum like they'd escaped. It's over. Klein's face reddened, the color of pride paying a bill it couldn't afford. He stepped back, 3 inches, then 2 more, and the principal's quiet insistence steered both guards toward the exit like a current that had remembered how to be a river. They didn't look at anyone. The door whispered shut behind them. Grant didn't celebrate. He sat, hands folded, eyes forward. The other 5 remained standing, not because they needed to, but because leaving pressure in the room for a moment would teach better than words from a lectern ever would. On the far side, Jalen breathed again. He had watched all of it from his place among black gowns and restless hands, and something had settled in him like a coin, finally finding the bottom of a well. The ceremony remembered itself. Names, applause, names, the cadence returned, but not the same. Something had been added to the room, an ingredient you can't name, but everyone tastes. Jalen's line shuffled forward. A girl with bright braids whispered, "You ready?" "More than you know," he whispered back, and meant it. He was 3 names from the podium when his palms stopped sweating. 2 names when the banner on the wall looked less ridiculous. 1 name when the announcer cleared her throat and found a different register to stand on. Jalen Naomi Cade. The gym didn't roar. It thundered. It rolled. It clapped like a metronome with a pulse. 6 men, Grant, Diego, Sawyer, Thane, Omar, Lucas, brought their hands together in perfect unison, a cadence that had been used other places to mark other moments. A salute without a salute. A promise you could hear. Jalen took the diploma, shook the principal's hand, turned to the seats and found his father's eyes as easily as he'd always found them in a crowded house, Elias's. Smile was small enough to hide and big enough to live under. Jalen nodded once and stepped off into the rest of his life. Other names followed, but the echo stayed. Teachers clapped too hard. Parents who had never met Elias wiped their eyes and didn't ask themselves why. The gym became a cathedral without saying what it worshipped. When the last cap hit the air and gravity did its job, when music burst and then broke, when the flood of bodies pushed toward the exits like a story trying to end, Elias didn't hurry. He stood only when the noise had lowered, and the aisle could carry him without touching anyone. Grant met him 3 steps from the row. "You good?" Grant asked. "I've been through worse," Elias said. Grant's mouth twitched. "Doesn't mean you should have to." Diego joined. "We tried to stay ghosts." "You did fine," Elias said. "You always do." They stood a moment longer, letting laughter drain from the building like water after a rain. Outside, the sun had shifted to late afternoon, the hour where shadows are longer than people, and truth is easier to photograph. Jalen was by the flagpole, gown unzipped, cap in his fist, phone forgotten in a pocket for once. The moment he saw his father, noise thinned. He closed half the distance fast, then slowed like something sacred had entered his feet. "You okay?" he asked. Elias nodded. "You?" Jalen looked down, then back up. "They tried to move you." "I know. I was going to say something. I mean it. I was 2 seconds. And that's why you didn't," Elias said. Jalen blinked. "What?" "Because you knew I could handle it," Elias replied. "And because you handled your moment. You didn't let anyone take it from you." Jalen swallowed. "Who were those guys?" Elias glanced toward the cluster by the exit. The 6 men stood, like they always did when they could help it, near concrete, eyes on angles. "Men I bled with," he said. "Men who remember." Jalen's shoulders went back, a shape he'd always had decided to show. That was powerful. "It was necessary," Elias said. Sometimes silence is the loudest thing in a room. Sometimes standing without speaking says more than 1,000 microphones. They didn't say anything for a while. The sun warmed the tops of their ears. Grant lifted a hand. Not a wave, not quite. And Jalen returned it like he had been practicing. The crowd thinned toward cars and dinners and balloons that would pop at midnight. Elias and Jalen walked to the Charger. The scratch by the passenger handle was exactly where Naomi had promised it would always be after that parking lot incident with the shopping cart at Langley's Market. Jalen traced it with a fingertip. She would have screamed the loudest today, he said. She would have made you retake every picture until your smile looked like your mother's instead of mine, Elias replied, and the grin that followed borrowed Naomi's light from the photo in his pocket. They closed the doors and let the silence tuck them in for a breath. I gotta ask, Jalen said, why didn't you say anything? You just sat. Elias tapped the wheel once, like it was a clock he could reset. Because I don't have to stand up for who I am, he said, and I don't need to raise my voice to be heard. Jalen stared out at the field where, earlier, he'd run laps in shoes that weren't meant for running laps. They disrespected you, in front of everybody. Yes, Elias said, and everybody saw it. They also saw something else. They saw 6 men who had every reason to be somewhere else, stand without a word, not because I asked them to, but because they understood the moment. He reached into his coat and pulled out the old photo again, folding it open like a prayer you don't mind letting someone else hear. I carried this through Kandahar, through losing your mother, through this morning, not because it gives me strength, but because it reminds me what strength is for. You always knew who had your back, Jalen whispered. I didn't have to know, Elias said. I had faith. Real men don't vanish when things get uncomfortable. They show up. They stand. He tucked the picture away and patted the pocket once, like a promise. Outside, the 6 seals were peeling away, one by one, like the tide. Diego first, then Fane, then Lucas with a 2-finger salute that only ever looked right on him. Grant lingered, glanced toward the Charger, and gave a nod that said 10,000 unsaid things. Elias returned it the same way. So what now? Jalen asked. Now we drive home, Elias said, turning the key. The engine answered with a low confidence. You pick dinner. Waffle House. Jalen grinned without shame. Of course, Elias said, and eased the car into the river of cars, making their separate ways into the same evening. They were almost to the light at County Road 7 when the pass tapped the glass. A figure jogged from the curb, breathless and not built for it. Mally, he waved once, both hands, and Elias eased to the shoulder. Sir, Mally said, palms up like he'd come to a house with a dog. Listen, I wanted to say I'm sorry. Elias waited. The principal's text, Mally swallowed. We were told to clear the row for a donor's family. It was wrong. I know it was wrong. I don't want that to be the story your son remembers. I can't fix it, but I can say it to your face. Jalen's hand tightened on the seat edge. Thank you for saying it, Elias replied. Not hostile, not warm, accurate. Mally's gaze flicked to the uniform, then away. My brother's army, he said, too quickly, as if he'd been carrying the sentence since the gym. We're not all. You're you, Elias said. He's him. Mally nodded, chastened by the precision. Congratulations, sir, to both of you. He stepped back, then added, for what it's worth, those men, when they stood, I felt it. He didn't have the words for what it was, and he knew it. He jogged back toward the school, smaller than when he'd arrived. Jalen exhaled. You didn't have to accept that. I didn't accept anything, Elias said. I heard him. The light turned green. They rolled forward. On the highway, the sky softened from iron to orange. They passed a field where kids had been playing soccer without any idea that, a few miles away, dignity had been argued with and then allowed to sit in the front row. The Charger's steady hum made room for the real conversation, the one Elias had saved for a day that mattered. Son, he said, eyes on the road. Life will hand you 100 chances to be angry. Some of them you should take. Most of them you should hand back unopened. Rage burns hot, and then you need somewhere to live. Dignity doesn't burn, it builds. Jalen stared at his reflection in the passenger window, the cap-line dent still across his hair, the chords bright in the glass. What if dignity doesn't work? Dignity isn't a tactic, Elias said. It's a temperature. You said it. Other people learn to live in it or get cold. Those men, Grant and the rest, they didn't argue. They changed the room by being who they are. That's the whole job. They drove in comfortable quiet until the Waffle House sign announced itself, like a promise America still kept. Inside, a waitress with a pen behind her ear called Elias Honey and Jalen Graduate, and wrote their order upside down without missing a beat. Scattered, smothered, covered. Chocolate milk Elias pretended not to like and ordered anyway. Halfway through a plate he would feel in his knees tomorrow, Elias said, "You want the stories." Jalen grinned. "All of them. You'll get some," Elias said. "Enough to know why a room can go quiet without anyone yelling. Enough to know what a hand on an engine block feels like when a man's leg is under it. Enough to know why your mother kept that flag by the bookshelf and never dusted it where anyone could see. Enough to carry it?" Jalen asked. Elias's eyes warmed. Enough to carry it. They paid. The waitress refused their attempt to leave a tip that would have started an argument. Back in the car, they sat a minute before turning the key, because sometimes you honor a day by not rushing out of it. Jalen finally said, "If they hadn't stood, they would have," Elias answered. "In any timeline where I earned it, they would have." As the Charger merged into the ribbon of taillights, the town behind them stitched itself back together. The gym would be cleaned, the banners boxed, the plastic chairs nested and wheeled away. But stories don't stack like chairs, they travel. By morning, what had happened would be in a dozen living rooms, 2 barbershops, and the corner of a church bulletin, where someone still wrote prayer requests by hand. The story wouldn't be about an argument. It would be about a temperature. And in the passenger seat with a diploma in his lap that felt heavier than paper, Jalen Naomi Cade understood a thing he had once only rehearsed. Manhood isn't noise, it's posture. It's how you hold yourself when no one is clapping, and how you stand when everyone is watching the wrong thing. They took the long way home because they'd earned it. Because some roads are better when you go slow. Because sometimes you don't leave a day, you let the day set you down somewhere softer than where it found you. Back on the mantle, a photo of Naomi and baby Jalen would be joined by a new one. A young man in a black gown, head tipped toward a father in blue, both smiling small and real. Sometime tonight, a text from Grant Ashford would arrive with nothing but a period, and Elias would reply with the same. That was their language, for I was there, I saw, I will always. And for everyone who had filled that gym, teachers, neighbors, strangers who showed up to clap for names they didn't know, the memory would return when they least expected it. A meeting where someone tried to push the wrong person out of the right seat. A store line where the rules bent in only one direction. A dinner table conversation about what respect looks like in the wild. They would remember 6 men who stood without a word. A father who didn't move. A son who kept walking. A room that learned in 10 heartbeats what strength actually sounds like. If this story found you when you needed it, if something in you stood up while you were sitting down, carry it forward. Somebody you love will need the temperature you set. And the next time the room starts to tilt, try the oldest tactic in the world. Set your feet. Quiet your hands. Look a man in the eye. Then let your silence speak.